Hello, everybody. I know it's been a while, so I just want to talk about the most urgent issues that have been going on. Um, so I want to start off talking about COP28, which is an environmental conference between many of the world leaders that are gathering starting today and over the next couple of days. Um, the number that they're going to come up with about wanting to stay at is 1.5 degrees Celsius. Um, and that's because since industrial revolution, we currently have warmed the planet by fossil fuels and by human activity has warmed the planet 1.2 degrees Celsius, and the world's on pace right now to warm to 1.5 degrees Celsius within 5 years, which is ridiculous. That's the number that they want to stay at, which is virtually impossible with how we are going right now and the lack of accountability internationally we have. The report was saying that by 2100, the world is expected to warm to 3 degrees Celsius, which is most likely the end of mankind. That's not an exaggeration. 5 degree difference the other way, 5 degrees colder, is an ice age. So, um, 3 degrees to 5 degrees, that range that they're talking about, they're saying 3 degrees Celsius up to 5 degrees Celsius is where we can be by the end of the century. That is, that may not be planet killing, but that is humanity killing. Like, that is the end of humanity, most likely. So if we get to that mark, we are all gone. Um, and it's very frustrating because that's where it seems like we're going to be at if we don't act quickly. And so COP28 is being hosted by UAE, and there were reports coming out that UAE planned. This is not a joke. UAE planned to discuss oil and gas deals with other governments at the climate summit. So at the summit, which is supposed to get an agreement with the majority of the world's countries to limit emissions, to lower our emissions, to try and get to 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is currently unattainable at the path we're on right now. Reports, which seem pretty credible, reports saying that UAE is planning to do the opposite and actually try and have oil and gas deals done during the freaking COP discussion. Trying to keep PG right now. It's very hard with all the negative news going on. That's part of the reason I was still following the news, but it was very difficult for me to follow it as closely as I was because a lot of it is negative, especially with climate change. So I'm here to just tell you the facts, tell you what I've found with research that I can back it up with. Um, Also, with COP27, which is held in Egypt, environmental groups criticized their agreement for not calling to phase down fossil fuels. COP20, this is how ineffective international agreements have been so far. COP27, the agreement that they came up with after their conference, they didn't call for phasing down all fossil fuels. Like, not even a timeline for it. Not at all. Isn't that supposed to be first and foremost what the point of the environmental meeting is on the world stage? Just so far, these meetings have been highly ineffective, have not gotten much done, and even if they have pledged something, have not been able to back it up, have not had the force to back it up. Going along with COP28, President Biden is not going. He is not even attending. Mr. Environmental, Mr. Doing everything he can to fight climate change, is not even going to go to this event. Is sending instead Vice President Harris to go. It's not. He doesn't have enough time on his schedule to be able to go to this international environmental meeting that's supposed to be crucial to lowering emissions worldwide with an international agreement. He can't even show up. So, needless to say, I've been very disappointed with President Biden. I know he's been doing some things that are good for climate change, with the plans that he's come out with trying to switch to more renewables, with trying to switch America to rely on electric vehicles instead of gas-powered vehicles, but it's still not enough. It's not enough. Um, some of his goals talking about 2050, talking about in decades from now. We don't have decades. We don't have 100 years. We don't have 50 years. We don't have 30 years. Okay? Climate change is already happening. You can look at the data, and this is why I will not argue with climate deniers, because there's no point. The data is there. The scientists, 97% of scientists agree climate change is happening, is man-made, right? There are natural occurrences over long periods of time of ice ages and extreme heat, right? The planet warms a lot, cools a lot. There's natural cycles of heating and cooling. But this current path, this current trajectory that we are on, the planet warming, is man-made. And if people don't believe in that, there's no point in arguing, because the evidence is there. If they don't believe the evidence, they're just idiots. Okay? That's the bottom line. So 2050 goals are not good enough. 2035 goals are not good enough. We are in 2023. We have under a decade probably to get the most of this done. If you think about it, right, with what I said, if we're already at 1.2 degrees warmer than we were before the Industrial Revolution, if the 1.5 goal, which people are saying to go by, right, if we are going to hit that, presumably they say likely within the next 5 years, if that goal is going to be hit within 5 years, we need to. It seems like it's unlikely to even get to 2 degrees. And 2 degrees is bad. 3 degrees is horrible. 2 degrees is bad. And it seems unlikely that we can even get to 2 degrees, that we can even limit to that point. And, we just need to address the fact that world leaders are not doing enough. Current pledges are not enough. They're a joke. They're a joke to humanity, the pledges that have been done so far, because they have nothing to force them to be implemented. It's still the states that decide it. So if rich countries like the United States, like Western Europe, Germany, France, United Kingdom, China, all these major polluters, if they don't want to enforce this, they don't have to. There's nothing to hold countries accountable, especially the ones who produce the most and pollute the most. That is why it is a systemic issue that we are dealing with. What I mean by that is capitalism is the worst system ever created by mankind. It's systemically and fundamentally a horrible, corrupt system. Because if you think about it, right, I'm not going to go too much into details about how capitalism works. I'm not an economist. I'm not an expert. I just know how it works, okay? On a basic level. So capitalism is all about maximizing profits. Before environmental concerns, before social concerns, capitalism works best when people make the most money by selling the most things, right? When you look at economic growth, it's about people buying into things, like buying the most things possible. When you look at GDPs of countries, it's about how many goods they sold, right? Capitalism is a flawed, horrible system, right? That the U.S. has to be held accountable. The U.S. has led promoting capitalism, not just within its own borders, but worldwide, and forced other countries, especially developing countries, to implement capitalism and free trade agreements and restrictions to government intervention due to the IMF, due to the World Bank, due to international institutions, which the U.S. has way more influence than everyone else because they invest the most money into it. But capitalism is a horrible system, right? And it's because if you look at how capitalism works, it benefits the most wealthy. It creates high inequality in income, right? And the people who pollute the most are the most successful, right? They're the people that everyone else has the goal to be, right? In America, it's not just the goal of being able for a lot of people to satisfy themselves, to be able to make enough money to satisfy their basic needs. No, in America, it is about having this luxurious lifestyle that is very stupid, that is very selfish, that hurts everybody else on the planet. But because the richest of the rich can have it, they do have it, and there's no capitalism just promotes that, right? Also with corporations, the richest corporations that pollute the most, they don't get restricted much because that's how capitalism works. Capitalism is about the rich exploiting the poor, creating these distinctions, right? There needs to be a poor so that the rich can be rich, right? If everyone has around the same income, then there's not going to be an ultra rich because there just needs to be that gap for capitalism to work the most effectively. And it's just horrible that citizens are like the burden is put on citizens for climate change. It's always about what can you be doing to lower your emissions? What can you be doing to lower your footprint? And that part is true to some extent, right? Like you don't need to buy 100 pairs of shoes. You don't need to buy clothes every month to try and fit the latest trends and fast fashion and all that bullshit, right? Um, I don't care, right? I'm speaking the truth here. Um, but this is to put an extent, right? To here's here. I just want to tell you this so that you know how bad it is, right? There was a study recently put out there that said that the richest 1% burn more carbon than the poorest 66%. Okay, the richest 1%, the biggest douchebags on the planet for the most part, I would say maybe there's an exception or two. For the most part, the biggest douchebags on the planet, aka the richest 1%, burn more carbon than the poorest 66%. Think about that. The poorest two-thirds of people, and you're talking about 1%, and 1% pollute more, right? It's more than 50, 66, like that should be hard to comprehend how bad the rich pollute, to pollute more than two-thirds of the whole population, right? And they consume thousands of times, not hundreds, thousands of times more than the global average. Okay? The burden should not be put fully on citizens, partially, but not fully. It should be mostly on the ultra rich douchebags who spend way more than they need to because they feel like they can and because capitalism allows them to. Ultra rich corporations, which fight to the bottom of the barrel in terms of trying to move where there's the least amount of human rights, labor rights, environmental rights to try and maximize their profits. And rich countries like the United States and China who need to fucking get more accountable with their pollution and their all of the problems that, I mean, the U.S. with meat consumption, factory farming, fast fashion, ultra high consumerism, um, consumption just at an all time high. You know, there's so many problems, right? I'm sure I could rant about this for a long time, but I just want to point that out there with the report that came out um, by the Guardian and also a different institute. Uh, the rich also invest in organizations that, first of all, deny climate change. The rich all have pushed this huge agenda about denying climate change or all this misinformation that gets people confused or believing the wrong things, believing lies. They also prevent environmental action. Capitalism also keeps the fossil fuel industry going. Wow, who would have saw that coming, right? You talk about coal, you talk about oil, you talk about natural gas. Um, Fossil fuel industry loves capitalism. It loves capitalism. Why? Because capitalism, if fossil fuels are, making a lot of countries money, it doesn't make it easy to move off of fossil fuels. Like obviously the US, for example, can't just shut off fossil fuels like that. Can't say, okay, today we're going to stop using oil, we're going to stop using coal and natural gas today. Just shut, that would lead to collapse. Like you can't have that rapid of turnover, right? But capitalism tells people, like with capitalism, why, if you're looking at these billionaire assholes who run fossil fuel industries, right? Why are they going to stop, why are they going to try and lower the amount of fossil fuels that are produced when they're making so much money off of it? Because that's all they care about. They're greedy and they care about money. And they don't care about the survival of the human race down the line. They don't care about other people that are suffering from the environmental catastrophes, from the, human rights or social justice catastrophes from it. They just care about raking in as much money as possible. And you know what system does that? Capitalism. They also want to criminalize environmental protests. Um, it's absolutely horrible. So, sorry, this pissed me off. One thing the United States needs to do that other countries in Europe and other countries around the world have done, which is successful, proportional representation. In the US, we have a system, which is very stupid, by the way. We have a system of winner takes all, right? Single member districts. So that way, the single member districts allows for two major parties to control things, right? The Democrats and the Republicans. You can't have third parties in a single member district because it's just you have two parties, right? And the winner takes all. So there's no point of having more than two parties effectively, because if it's winner takes all, then it's just two forces fighting against one another, and the party who gets 51% is going to win the seats. Proportional representation allows for more parties. We shouldn't have like 20 parties. That you can have a limit and say like some countries do, where you can say, okay, like 5% is the minimum amount of votes that a party needs to get to be able to have seats or to have representation, right? It's a way more effective system, and the U.S. should definitely implement proportional representation for Congress. It would make people like Congress a lot more. Congress approval rating would go way up, and also would make it more democratic than we are. Um, and people would be able to express their beliefs more and probably get invested in politics more in the U.S. if we had more than two dominant parties. We do technically have more than two parties, but it's just the Democrats and the Republicans that run things. Not very well, by the way. Um, I think the best thing is if we have proportional representation, we implement that in the system, right? And we have the Green Party become dominant. The Green Party would push environmental goals first, and maybe the best chance that America would have to being able to properly regulate industries and address climate change before it's too late. Now I wanted to talk pretty quickly on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I was worried talking about this just because it's so controversial right now, and I wanted to make sure I had enough information on it. But after doing some more research, like I said, I was following the issue along. Now that I've done some more research, I want to quickly talk about it and update you all on what's going on. So I just want to say that what Hamas did was wrong. What Israel is doing, I feel, is even more wrong. Give you a bit of background. After World War II and the Holocaust of Jews, the world wanted to give Jews their own homeland. So the UN, shortly after World War II, apportioned land, which is Israel. By the way, that Palestinians were already living there, and so that's where it became the homeland for Jewish people, right? The Israeli government used their military force, which, by the way, is the U.S. is the biggest supporter of Israel, to have Palestinians feel like second-class citizens, doing things like military checkpoints, limiting their travel, lowering and Palestinians having a lower rate of living. That's been the case for decades. The Hamas, which is a terrorist group, killed hundreds of Israeli citizens at a concert. The number I saw last was 1,200 people killed in their attacks. And obviously, that's very wrong. I'm not saying I'm in support of Hamas. I'm not saying what they did was right. Of course, it's not, right? And there should have been a response to that, right? And Hamas carelessly endangered Palestinians in Israel by their attacks. It didn't make any sense. The Hamas is just an extreme Palestinian group that wants the fall of Israel, right? But it seemed that they wanted Israel to over-respond with force, which, by the way, they did. So many Palestinians live in Gaza and the West Bank. Israel, in the matter of less than 2 months now. Yeah, less than 2 months has slaughtered 14,000 Palestinians. 14,000 Palestinians have died at the hands of Israel. Many of whom are women and children, not soldiers, women and children, actual citizens. Okay, Israel very likely committed war crimes. And by the way, the U.S. media coverage of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been bad, like very bad, for the fact that the U.S. has been such a strong supporter of Israel, and it's been showing in the media coverage where they don't talk about as much the Palestinian people who are getting killed. It's just so much. So a lot of the media has been pro-Israel, right? To give you a context of how much the U.S. has supported Israel, um, it's Israel's closest ally and has given Israel over $260 billion in military economic aid. I know we spend way too much on our military, right? So you may say, oh, the U.S. spends trillions on our military. Still, they have given Israel, for military and economic aid, $260 billion. Okay, and now Israel is using that military aid to um, commit basically like it's a genocide on Palestinian people. Um, that's what people have been calling it. I think it's fair to call it that. 14,000 Palestinian people killed in the span of less than 2 months. The U.S. stance in the beginning of this conflict was very bad. Biden, U.S. stance was full support of Israel, fully standing by Israel and their prime minister amidst this, thousands of Palestinian people being killed. Um, you know, what further complicates things, as the world's dealing with this, Iran is a key supporter of Hamas, and people were accusing Iran of, helping Hamas do the attacks on Israeli civilians, which they have denied. And so, with this fighting, there has been a temporary pause in fighting um, to exchange hostages. The ceasefire has gone for 7 days now, and the U.S. now has taken back from its extreme stance of just supporting Israel. They sent Secretary of State Anthony Blinken arrived in Israel to avoid returning to fighting, and there needs to be a stop in fighting in totality. This fighting needs to stop. Many civilians are getting killed. There's no need to continue this fighting. The Ukraine-Russia war is still ongoing. By the way, that coverage is horrible because nobody's talking about it, especially U.S. media coverage has been bad generally. Um, so I just wanted to give you a bit of news with that. Mariana Budanova, wife of Ukraine's intelligence head, Kyrylo Budanov, I'm sorry, I probably said that wrong, was poisoned, probably by Russia. There was a storm that killed 14 people and left over 2 million in Russia and Ukraine without power, and tornadoes are forecast to hit the Black Sea region from it. The storm forced Russia to return naval vessels back to their bases, so that was at least good. Um, and the nations of the world, so with and the fighting in the Ukraine and Russia war needs to stop as well. It's not benefiting anyone. Just needs to stop. Russia just needs to let Ukraine be its own sovereign territory. It's not going to be able to overtake Ukraine, and that's been proven by the fighting lasting this long. That fighting and the fighting between Israeli and Palestinians needs to stop as well. Um, the world needs to unite and stop these unnecessary killings and war and address climate change before it kills us all. Climate change is something that we can easily unify. I say easy, it's not going to be an easy process, but I mean, it should be an easy force to unify the world. Um, and we need to do it before it's too late. So thank you all for watching. Appreciate all of your support, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you.